Hello, welcome to the Self-Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Unit 17, Alienation, and our topic is Division of Labor. The other aspect of alienation is the dehumanization of labor itself. This happens in the course of the new division of labor promoted by capitalism. Division of labor is not invented by capitalism. It is developed at an early stage of the history. It is at the same time the source of material and cultural progress and of human alienation. It increases the productivity of human labor. It makes it possible to produce a surplus, which again is a necessary condition for the development of culture, art, politics, and also religion. The existence of philosophers and artists, priests, and the kings is possible only on this fundamental principle of division of labor. But the progressive development of culture takes place at the cost of the direct producers. Their horizon narrows down. They get specialized and lost their relation to the process as a whole. The same philosopher, priests, and kings monopolize the control over society as a whole. They enjoy the freedom which is based on the understanding and control of the total process. The others lose their freedom. They are no longer responsible member of a tribe, but isolated villagers in a huge empire, or slaves without rights, or serfs in the feudal setup. Their lives get more and more dominated by alien forces beyond their control. In this way, all division of labor lead to alienation. In the next stage of manufacture, the technical division of labor begins. Each worker is assigned to a few operations on which he specializes. Out of this, a hierarchy of labor power develops from most skilled to unskilled. Management becomes more important. Apart from control, it assumes more and more the function of planning and conceptualization of the work. The workers have to execute the task assigned to them. But as long as they are skilled, they have still a certain freedom and control within the limits of their function. Thus, in this period, 16th to 18th century, three fundamental changes in the character of productive work took place. First, capitalist management imposed strict discipline of labor through means of despotic control. The artisans of old had the freedom to choose their own rhythm and style of work. Once forced into workshop and manufacture, they have to subordinate themselves to the will of managing capitalist. To manage originally meant to train a horse in his pace, to cause him to do the exercises of the manager, and control is the central concept of all management. Under capitalist management also, that fundamental division develops which separates the conceptualization and execution of the work. This is given with the development of the detail workers who are no longer related to the production of the whole. The capitalist drive for profit creates for the first time a large scale unskilled labor, that is, workers who for their lifetime are condemned to do cheap, unskilled labor. In the social division of labor, the producers may have been alienated from the whole society, but there is still a possibility of meaningful self-realization in the work. In the technical division of labor, alienation involves the process of labor itself. The social division of labor subdivides society. The technical division of labor subdivides humans. Bremen shows that it is capitalism which first creates this scarcity of skills. Every step in the labor process is divorced, so far as possible, from special knowledge and training and reduced to simple labor. Meanwhile, the relatively few persons for whom special knowledge and training are reserved for freed so far as possible from the obligations of simple labor. In this way, a structure is given to all labor processes that at its extreme polarizes those whose time is infinitely valuable and those whose time is worth almost nothing. This might even be called the general law of capitalist division of labor. Now let us move to the next point, objectification. Marx analyzes the impact of machinery and modern industry on labor. He shows how the development of technology under capitalism is geared towards the maximum production of surplus value, and how it transforms the worker on the basis of the capitalist division of labor into a living appendage of a lifeless mechanism. In handicrafts and manufacture, the workman makes use of a tool. In the factory, the machine makes use of him. There are movements of the instrument of labor proceed from him. Here it is the movements of the machine that he must follow. In manufacture, the workmen are parts of a living mechanism. In the factory, we have lifeless mechanism independent of the workman, who becomes its mere living appendage. The fundamental characteristics of machinery is that it removes the tool from the hands of the workers and fits it into a mechanism which is moved independently from the worker. This opens new avenues for exploitation, and above all, it leads to the further degradation of the worker by completing the separation of the intellectual powers of production from the manual labor, and the conversion of those powers into the might of capital over labor. This machinery becomes, for most of the working population, the source not of freedom but of enslavement, not of mastery but of helplessness, and not of the broadening of the horizon of labor but of the confinement of worker within a blind round of servile duties in which the machine appears as the embodiment of science and the worker as little or nothing. Technically speaking, it is the transformation of labor from processes based on skill to processes based upon science. That this process led to the degradation of the workers is not an unavoidable result of the development of science and technology. but it is the consequence of the subordination of science and technology to the purpose of capital. Marx repeatedly characterized the alienation of the worker who faces the gigantic machinery of modern capitalist industry and who experiences his powerlessness in front of it as the rule of dead labor over living labor. The worker does not see it like this. He sees the machinery as representing the wealth, the capital of the capitalist, and the superior knowledge of the scientist, compared to which he himself is poor and ignorant and doomed to remain so. What confronts him is in fact objectified labor, the result of labor in the past. In pre-capitalist society, the producer was not confronted with means of production dominating and threatening him as an alien power. Hence, the rule of the capitalist over the worker is the rule of the things over the man, of dead labor over the living, of the product over the producer. What we are confronted by here is the alienation of man from his own labor. To that extent, the worker stands on a higher plane than the capitalist from the outset, since the latter has his roots in the process of alienation and finds absolute satisfaction in it. Whereas right from the start, the worker is a victim who confronts it as a rebel and experiences it as a process of enslavement. First, the fact that the label is external to the worker, that is, it does not belong to his essential being, that in his work, therefore, he does not affirm himself but denies himself, does not feel content but unhappy, does not develop freely his physical and mental energy, but mortifies his body and ruins his mind. The worker therefore only feels himself outside his work, and in his work feels outside himself. He is at home when he is not working, and when he is working, he is not at home. His labor is therefore not voluntary, but coerced. It is forced labor. It is therefore not the satisfaction of a need. It is merely a means to satisfy needs external to it. Its alien character merges clearly in the fact that as soon as no physical or other compulsion exists, labor is shunned like the plague. External labor, labor in which man alienates himself, is a labor of self-sacrifice, of mortification. Lastly, the external character of labor for the worker appears in the fact that it is not his own, but someone else, that it does not belong to him, that in it he belongs not to himself but to another. Just as in religion, the spontaneous activity of the human imagination, of the human brain and the human heart operates independently of the individual, that is, operates on him as an alien, divine or diabolical activity. In the same way, the worker's activity is not his spontaneous activity. It belongs to another. It is the loss of his self. Alienation is inevitable in modern society because with the demand for the better technology and rising consumerism, man will continue to be alienated in one form or the other. Increasing division of labor and emergence of specialists make men dependent on the product, and it is not likely that this phenomena of alienation will stagnate and retrogress. Now let us conclude the unit. Alienation is an objective condition inherent in the social and economic arrangement of capitalism. It is impossible to extricate Marx's ideas about the alienation from his wider sociological discussion of the division of labor, the evolution of private property relations, and the emergence of conflicting classes. In the Marxian terminology, alienation is an objectively verifiable state of affair, inherent in the specific social relations of the capitalist production. For Marx, the history of mankind is not only a history of class struggle, but also of the increasing alienation of man. Now let us wind up the session, and we have come to the end of the unit. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with the Self Learning podcast.